Hello and welcome back to Total Football, where we round up the best and the worst from the Champions League. We've just finished watching Real Madrid 2, Chelsea 0, goals from Karim, Benzema and Marco Asensio. I'm joined by Henry Hill, I'm joined by Patrick van Straten, and we're going to dissect what we have just witnessed. Pato, it felt like after a pretty flat, lifeless season from Chelsea, that was a pretty flat, lifeless performance from Chelsea.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were ways in which they were maybe set up to fail, but in this game it just felt like they were never really able to cause Real Madrid problems. There were 2 breakaways early on, but after that it was very clear that they didn't have the pace to exploit them, and Real Madrid were able to pretty much play the game the way they wanted. And in the end, I'd say that maybe the stats and the performance are actually even more comfortable than the scoreline would lead you to believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think other than that Mount chance at the end, I can't really think of... Oh, there was that deflected effort from that Reece James cross from Sterling, and Courtois made a good save at his near post in the first half. But we're really clutching at straws to bring any positives in terms of Chelsea's attacking play. And whether they made some mistakes in the setup, we're going to get onto in due course. But Henry, this was Real Madrid just sort of cruising through this game really in second gear, it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, they have an advantage where I know they lost to Villarreal recently, but they are such a dominant team in that division. I think that almost suited them coming up against the Chelsea side. That really, their main prerogative today was going to be sit back and try and hit them on the break, which they did originally, and then Real Madrid essentially adjusted and didn't let anything else through. So yeah, I think Real Madrid, they're a weird kind of team. They tend to sort of morph against whoever they're playing, and we saw against Man City last season and at points against Chelsea, they're happy to do nothing and then sort of turn it on for a few brief moments. We kind of saw that again tonight. They got the job done. People will say it wasn't a clinical enough performance, but I just think that's the way they tend to operate. They just go in little spurts as opposed to sort of an all-round dominant display, and they just had too much for this Chelsea side. And what's really sort of sad, if you look at that second goal, they've actually switched off from the corner.
Yeah.
They're all there just sorting themselves out. They're taking a short corner, and Cucurella is the only one that eventually realised what was going on, and it was too late. So that's the really disappointing thing for Chelsea, because if they'd sort of muddled their way through with a 1-0 defeat, that's almost fine. You'd take that. But 2-0 off a really lazy defensive display at the corner, that's where the problems begin to seep in once more.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've lost one of their key attacking threats, if you can count any attacking threats in this Chelsea side this season, in Ben Chilwell for the second leg after he was red carded for a pretty cynical pullback after Rodrigo was through on goal, after Fede Valverde played a ball over the top and Chilwell tugged back his arm. It probably was a red card. It felt a little bit soft, but at the same time it was a goal-scoring opportunity. Pat, let's get into where Lampard potentially got this wrong. Did you have any selection issues that could have elicited more of an attacking performance or some cohesion potentially?
I didn't really mind the lineup. I thought the lineup was actually okay when it came out. Weirdly, kind of the weak point you'd have said in it was maybe Koulibaly, who actually had a great game until he went off. But it needed those wing-backs to push high and wide. You needed to have attacking threat from them, because Sterling does not have the pace he once had. Felix doesn't really want to run in behind. He could do it a bit, but again, he's not particularly fast. He's a facilitator. So you were hoping to get something out of the wing-backs, and it actually just felt all the time like players were running into traffic with very little support around them. There were so many times when we were watching that we were frustrated that somebody would look up to see what was available to them, and it was like, oh, I've got to beat three Real Madrid players. But I don't mind the idea of, packing the midfield with players like Enzo, Conte and Kovacic, I think makes a ton of sense. But the reason you do that and the reason you play a back three is because that frees up your wing backs. Well, if your wing backs aren't particularly free, then ultimately you've done all that kind of for nothing.
It's quite interesting. The one time, as you said at the start, that Reece James really did get into an attacking position, they had their best chance of the entire game.
Yeah.
The problem was Real Madrid just split their wingers super wide and leave them in the positions where you want Chilwell and James defending, and they're so dangerous that we saw Vinicius really break through and get the better of James across most of the game. It has to be said, and in the first half he got himself into a few good positions, so it's really smart by Real Madrid. Recognise where the main attack from Chelsea is coming, put in your best attackers to fill in the spaces that they need to fill back into, and then Chelsea have got a real problem if they do overcommit going forward. And yeah, I think James realised pretty quickly that if he did gun forward to try and help the attack, his team are going to be in deep trouble defending his own half.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think before the game, people were reasonably confident of Chelsea's chances insofar as their record against Real Madrid isn't as bad as some other English sides. I mean, they beat them in the semi-finals in 2021. They actually beat them in the Bernabeu last year. It was only that Karim Benzema hat-trick at Stamford Bridge that ultimately saw them fail to progress out of that tie. But there was just such a big ask for Frank Lampard, their 4th manager of the season, to get any sort of win out of this tie at least. But I was expecting more of a performance, to be honest. I was expecting a little bit more cohesion, and it looked like a few of those players were quite rusty, hadn't played together a lot. I mean, N'Golo Kante in that midfield, just far off the 2021 animal that we saw in that Champions League winning run. I thought he was magnificent under Tuchel in that stage. And yeah, we shouldn't expect too much. He's playing against Real Madrid on a comeback, but this was far from his best performance. Henry, in terms of Real Madrid, we assume they're going to go through now. Is this the sort of performance that would potentially worry Man City or Bayern Munich if they stage an unlikely comeback of their own in the next round?
As I kind of said before, I do think they just kind of raise their level to their opposition. It is difficult when you're playing a Chelsea side that did look as disorganised as we kind of discussed today. Midfielders getting in each other's way, devoid of confidence going forward. I think Pat's got more of an opinion on this than me in terms of, Man City do look pretty imperious at the moment, it has to be said. In a funny way, I wouldn't be shocked if they did the same thing last year, where they were basically out of the contest for most of it, and then only really got ahead on goals scored with about 5 minutes of normal time to play. I think they would rise to the challenge, the Champions League semi-final. Let's not write off Chelsea just yet, has to be said. But yeah, I do think that at the moment, City are certainly favourites in that quadrant to get through. But then again, I don't think you should judge Real Madrid too much on what we've just seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like they had so many more gears to go to. Pat, before we sort of wrap up, who were some of the key men that impressed you, and who were the sort of performers that really didn't impress you?
Well, Vinicius Jr. was obviously kind of the danger man the whole way through the game. Like, as Henry said, in a way, it's his threat which completely decided the tactical battle. Because you can push your wingers high to try and pin back the wing backs. Pin back the wing backs.
Yeah,
yes,
that works.
But if they aren't, sufficiently dangerous, those wing backs are eventually going to realise they can leave them alone. Well, Vinicius was just dangerous all night. Was getting to everything faster. Just looked sharper than pretty much everybody on the pitch. I think it was 4 dribbles, 4 key passes, 3 shots, something like that. It's absolutely obscene. And he dovetails so perfectly with Benzema because Benzema is such a steady possession point. He can reel the ball in, he can hold people off, and he can almost always find Vinicius. So that was really helpful. Honestly, I thought Fofana had some interesting moments kind of running forward, but he was also far too sloppy on the ball. Only really made to look better by the performance from Enzo Fernandez, who I thought was the worst player on the pitch. It's rough because I think he's probably been Chelsea's best player since he signed for them. But in this game, I thought he looked like he had absolutely no idea what was going on. He didn't really win the ball back. In fact, the Chelsea back line did the lion's share of the ball winning in this game, which shows how easily Real Madrid was able to get through what was, in theory, a congested midfield. But, 1 tackle, 0 interceptions is crazy low. 0 dribbles, okay, he's not that much of a dribbler, but it more just felt that whenever I saw him, whenever he popped up, he was giving the ball away. There was no crispness to the passing. And I do think he was put in a position to fail because he didn't have runners who he could hit even when he got time and space on the ball. But when you're not going to have a lot of possession, and especially after the red card, you need the guy playing in that position to be ball secure. And at no point in this game did Enzo Fernandez offer them that. And I just thought, ultimately, he was almost a wasted position. They'd have been better off just putting on somebody like Mudryk, who at least would offer something for Real Madrid to think about rather than just another midfielder.
Yeah, it felt like Lampard's maybe key changes as well came when they were already 2-0 down as well, with Mount and Gallagher coming on. Could he have made those changes slightly earlier? But I tend to agree with what the guy said earlier. I don't think the starting 11 had too many issues in it. It was just, Sterling not having his best game, João Felix pretty much anonymous, and they really struggled to build and sustain attacks, except for a couple of dangerous moments from Reece James. Before we leave you, I'm just going to tell you what's coming up next. So Chelsea, it doesn't get any easier. They play Brighton at home, then Real Madrid at home, then they've got Brentford, then Arsenal. Pretty bleak for the Blues. Real Madrid, well, La Liga is pretty much gone now, but they do play Cadiz away this weekend. They are 13 points behind Barcelona with 10 matches remaining. They do have a Copa del Rey final to look forward to against Osasuna, and it looks like they'll be through to the semi-finals against likely Man City. But we're hoping for a bit more drama in the quarter-finals so far, and maybe a few comebacks. So never write off Chelsea and particularly Bayern Munich. but it does look like they'll be making their way through to the semi-finals once again. Guys, if you've enjoyed this video, let us know in the comments. How far do you think Real Madrid can go in this year's competition? If you've enjoyed it, remember to like it and subscribe to Eurofootball Daily, and we'll catch you later in the week. Bye-bye.